You guys can have a seat, and good morning. My name is Jason, if you're new here, and not only am I on staff here as one of the teaching pastors, which I get to kind of do today, um, I'm also on staff as a professional mental health counselor. And, ever since I started helping people, working with people in the areas of mental, emotional health, something has become real clear to me. It's like one of those things like back when I was in the market for a car and I had an idea of what kind of car I wanted. It's like I started seeing it everywhere. They were all over the road. It was just, you could not notice it. Same thing has happened in this space for me as well. It's something that I really never noticed before, but when I started working with people in this area, I look around myself now, and it's like in the church especially, I see this everywhere I look. And here's what I've seen. I think, and I know there are exceptions to everything, so, give me the grace there. But I think overall, this is true. I think overall, the church in America in our day is making a very serious error. I think we've missed some things. And I think this error that we're making is keeping us from becoming and living as the disciples of Jesus that he intended for us to be. And, we've been in this series for the past few weeks called For Coweta, because what we want to be as a church is a church of a group of people, a community of Christ followers that are for our neighbors, that are for the people living all around us in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, in our places of business, and the places that we hang out. We want to be for the people within our community. And what that really means is we want to be like Jesus. We want to love our community the same way that God the Father has shown us his love through Jesus in the way that he has loved us. So if we're going to do this together, and as Nathan's so great, he did such a great job explaining this to us, what we do is to be for Coweta, we bear the name of God. We bear the name of Jesus almost like all across our forehead everywhere we go because we live in the way of Jesus. If we're going to do that in our community, then I believe we have to start talking about this particular error, and we have to start correcting it. Now, I'll illustrate what I'm talking about. How many of you know what the letters WWJD mean? I see a lot of hands. What does it mean? What would Jesus do? Yeah, see, if you were a serious Christian back in the 90s, you had to know what WWJD was because that's when the trend started, right? How many of you wore the bracelet? Be honest. Yeah, okay. You were a serious Christian in the 90s, by the way. Yeah, everybody had the bracelet on. WWJD. What would Jesus do? Now, let me just say right up front, that I think that was a great sentiment. There's nothing wrong. Not a terrible idea at all. Now, the merchandise, that was a terrible idea. We should have not how do you say that? We shouldn't have turned it into a commodity. That's what we shouldn't have done, but we did. That was a horrible idea. But the sentiment was good. And what we were trying to communicate was, hey, in whatever circumstance you find yourself in, asking yourself, what would Jesus do in my place? If he were here, what would he do? That's not a bad idea. And so in the church, we become to care a lot about what Jesus did. And for good reason. We want to imitate him. We want to do the right things. In the church, we also care a lot about what Jesus taught, and rightly so. We should know the teachings of Jesus, so that we can think the right thoughts about God and about him so that we might know who he is and think well. That's good. Not a bad idea. But if you're someone who follows Jesus and you've done this for a long time, how many times have you asked yourself this question? What did Jesus feel? What kinds of emotions did Jesus experience? How did Jesus express his emotions? How did he respond to the emotions that he had? My guess is most of you haven't spent a whole lot of time on that question. I hadn't spent a whole lot of time on that question in my life for a long, long time. Most Christians don't. And the truth is, most churches don't talk about that question very often, if at all. In fact, I thought about it, and I could be wrong, always. But I don't think in my 50 years of being in the church, which is my entire life, I don't think I've ever heard a sermon specifically about the emotional nature of Jesus and what that means for the emotional life of a Christian. And so I decided, well, I think I'll just write one and I'll preach it. And that's what I'm going to attempt to do today. But I need to start sort of at the beginning, and you'll have to forgive me because some of you are going to get it's going to feel like deep water for just a second because I'm going to hang out a little bit in some theology, and that's a bad word for some of you. But we have to start there in order to understand who we're talking about when we're talking about Jesus and his emotional nature. Jesus is fully God, right? Jesus is also fully human. Okay. Jesus is a person within the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This is what we believe. We believe Jesus exists eternally as God, but Jesus came into space and time and took on flesh and blood just as we are. And part of becoming a human being means Jesus also took on the experiences and the realities of what it means to be a human being. And that means that Jesus is a fully emotional being just like you are and just like I am. In other words, Jesus has felt and feels everything that we feel. Jesus knows loneliness. He knows what it's like to be depressed. He knows what it's like to be angry, surprised, to dread things, to fear things, to be disappointed. Because every human being is an emotional being. Therefore, Jesus was and Jesus is emotional. And I have to say the word is on purpose. Because when Jesus left time and space, when he was resurrected from the dead and he ascended into heaven, he did not suddenly stop being a human. Now, see, a lot of us don't know this, but we've got this idea in our heads that's different. We have this idea that, okay, Jesus resurrected, and then somehow he got translated into some disembodied, non-physical spirit, and he's just kind of out there floating around. He is not. He is not. That is a lie. Jesus is a glorified, redeemed human body. He has passed from life into death and gone through it, is now resurrected. And this is hard for us to get our minds around, but I just want you to sit with this for a second. There is a human being in the Trinity. Now, I can't explain that to you, but it's true. And the next time Jesus enters into time and space, he will transform our bodies and we will become like him. See, we don't believe as Christians that human beings become gods, but we do believe that God certainly has become a human and one day we will be like him. This is what Jesus, this is what the apostles, this is what the scriptures, this is what the church fathers all throughout the centuries have taught us. So, when we look through, and I apologize for the theology lesson, it's over, okay? But when we look through that lens, honestly, when we look through that lens and we see Jesus in the Gospels as a human being who possesses emotions, we not only see his emotions, we not only see how he expressed his emotions, we begin to see an example of how we can relate to our own emotions.
One story almost everybody remembers is in John 11, when Jesus' good friend Lazarus has died. Jesus comes into town and meets his friends and family, and they're mourning and grieving their loss. Jesus weeps with them. And what's interesting about this is Jesus has already told his disciple what he's going to do. I'm going to wake Lazarus up and raise him from the dead. Jesus, you already know the ending. You know what's going to happen. What are you crying for? Because he felt the pain and the grief of his friends and he didn't suppress it. He expressed it. Because that's what emotionally healthy people do. One time, Jesus walks into a place of worship and sees a man with a deformed hand. And Jesus wants to restore his hand so he can work again and not be in pain. But the enemies of Jesus would rather he withhold doing good for this man because it violates their interpretation of the Sabbath laws. And Mark tells us that he, Jesus, looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. Now, how did Mark know that Jesus was angry and sad? Jesus never says this. Because apparently there was someone there who looked into Jesus' face and saw the way he responded to these people. He can't believe their lack of compassion for a hurting person. He's frustrated at them and he's heartbroken all at the same time. And it shows. People see it all over Jesus. Another example comes at a moment in Jesus' ministry when he sends out a group of 72 followers to announce the kingdom of God, to heal the sick and cast out demons. And they all come back and they're so happy because the word is spreading and people are responding. They say, Jesus, even the demons obey us when we use your name. And when Jesus sees their excitement and hears their report, Luke tells us, at that same time, Jesus was filled with the joy of the Holy Spirit. Not only does Jesus grieve and weep and get frustrated and angry, he feels joy and excitement and satisfaction. But Jesus, God in the flesh, also wrestled with fear and distress and anxiety. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 26, he tells us that on the night before Jesus went to the cross, he knew what was coming. He anticipated the torture, the pain and suffering. So he leads his disciples to a garden so they can pray. And Jesus tells them, my soul is overwhelmed and crushed with grief to the point of death. In other words, these feelings I'm having are so heavy, it feels like I'm dying. Interestingly, people who experience what we now call panic attacks report similar feelings. Jesus falls to the ground and prays, Father, if it can be done any other way, can you keep this from happening to me? Jesus prays like this in agony into the night. One of the gospel writers tells us he was in such stress that he sweated drops of blood. Now, this is very rare, but it's an actual medical condition called hematidrosis. It's when someone experiences so much stress that the fight or flight response in your brain is so intense that it causes the tiny blood vessels near the sweat glands to rupture and bleed into your sweat. My guess is you've never felt stress that intensely before, but Jesus did. So what does all this mean? It means that Jesus' emotions were not a liability that held him back or a problem for him to solve. They did not get in the way of his doing the will of God and being obedient to the Father. In fact, they were essential to how he related to people and to God. Jesus didn't hide his emotions or try to sanitize them, even when he was in public. His emotions were healthy and holy and human. Jesus named his emotions rather than suppress them or shame them. He used emotions to guide his actions.
Now, here's the mistake I believe that most of us Christians have been making whenever we talk about what it means to follow Jesus. We've bought into a pretty dangerous lie that the only thing that matters in following Jesus is what do you think, what do you believe, and what do you do? Our discipleship to Jesus tends to only center around beliefs and actions. What did Jesus teach? What do you believe about that? What did Jesus do? Are you doing that? So whatever Jesus taught, whatever Jesus did, believe it and do it. And everything else is just an obstacle to that, especially your emotions. In fact, you may have even heard some Christians, well-meaning, say, hey, just forget your feelings, Just believe it. Just do it. And I see this. I see it show up in several different ways, and I want to talk to you about some of these examples of these lies that we have bought into as the church. You may have experienced some of these. The first one I'll call the don't trust your heart mantra. You've probably heard this one before. It's the idea that you can't trust what you feel. Feelings will lead you astray. Feelings are dangerous. Sometimes we've even gone so far to say feelings are sinful. So if you feel something, well, you should probably just do the opposite because your feelings are lying to you. We even have a verse for this, by the way. It's Jeremiah 17:9. We say, the heart is deceitful above all things. And we take that to mean that what you feel in any moment is trying to deceive you. And if I could just humbly say, I thought back to my career in the ministry, which is going on 30 years now. And I think at some point, I don't remember the exact moment, but I think I taught this in this way. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. And hopefully none of you remember me doing that. I think we've taken this verse sometimes out of context, and we have used it, unfortunately, to convince people that you should ignore your feelings, you should suppress your feelings, because if you feel sad or you feel angry or you feel depressed, Well, that probably means you're sinning. Or it probably means that you're just spiritually immature and you don't have enough faith. And we've got a lot of Christians who wound up believing that if I trust my emotions, I'm not trusting in God. But the truth is that God gave you your emotions. In fact, God is feeling your emotions right along with you. Now, I don't want to go too far on this. Of course, I'm not saying that you should do whatever you feel. That's not wise. So don't go that far. But your feelings, they do matter. And your feelings can be discipled. They can be used to grow your relationship to God and other people. So we need to get rid of this don't trust your heart mantra, this lie that we believe. Here's another one. We have over-intellectualized our discipleship to Jesus. And I've kind of touched on this already. We say faith is just about what you believe. Faith has nothing to do with what you feel. In a lot of Christian circles, we get down to the point where following Jesus is just reduced to right beliefs equals right behavior. And we don't leave any space for our emotional development. And here's where that leads. And unfortunately, I've seen this. It leads to a bunch of Christians who can quote a lot of Bible verses, know a lot of theology, but they don't know how to grieve. Or they don't know how to lament, and they don't even know really how to rejoice, and they don't know how to empathize with the feelings or experiences of anybody else. In fact, there's this demonic thread running through the church right now, and you should reject it. They're even writing books about this. They're calling empathy a sin. It is a lie. They're saying it is sinful for you to empathize with the feelings of other people. Because, why? That will lead you to sin. And that is a lie. It leads us to becoming these people who are not fully developed emotionally. And we need to reject it. Here's another one I see. I call this one toxic positivity. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. I love that verse, don't you? It's a good verse. You should hold on to it. But here's the question you should ask. Does it really mean always when it says always? I mean, seriously. Does always really mean always? In other words, does that verse mean that if I'm not always joyful, then there's something wrong with me, that I'm sinning for some reason? Now, some Christians will tell you, well, yeah, being cheerful, being positive, that is a sign that you have a strong faith. But see, by default, that also means that if I feel sadness, grief, anxiety, or anger, then I am spiritually weak. Is that true? Is that how Jesus sees it? Well, maybe what we call weakness, Jesus sees differently. And see, here's why this lie is so dangerous. When the culture of the church encourages people to fake their emotions, fake their emotional health, when we walk into places like this and we just smile through the pain, or we ignore the trauma, or we deny the struggle that is going on inside of us, I start making you think that I'm okay and I'm not okay. And you start making me think that you're okay when you're not okay. And so now both of us walk into spaces like this where we're supposed to be for one another, and we're giving off the message that, hey, the only way to follow Jesus is if you keep it all together. And when we're doing that, we are becoming isolated, shame-filled, silent sufferers. In the same room together, worshiping the same God, and all lying to each other. And that right there leads to another lie. And I want to call this one out, but ladies, you get to take a moment off because this one's for the dudes. Real men don't cry. We say this stuff. There's a thread in the church as well, and we have told all men, you are leaders. But how can you lead effectively if you're feeling all these stupid emotions? And so we teach our men to suppress all of their emotions. Because for some of us, we've decided that some emotions are weak, and some of them, well, they're just feminine. Things like sadness or fear or tenderness or empathy, as I said earlier. I see a lot of guys in my counseling office, and I tell them this all the time. I say, you just need to be careful, Because the truth is that you and I, as men, have been culturally trained that the only appropriate manly emotion that you can express is anger. In our culture, anger is manly. It's tough. It gets things done. And the sad truth is we have created more than a generation of emotionally disconnected husbands and fathers and leaders even who struggle with intimacy or self-awareness. Anger, and I want to talk about this at another date in more detail, but the truth is anger is a secondary emotion that shows up in someone's life when they are hurt, afraid, or frustrated. The problem is most of us men were taught you can't ever show that you're hurt or afraid or frustrated. And so what do? We get mad. We brood. And our wives, well, your wife ends up in my office and says, why can't he let me inside? What's going on with him? I know something's wrong. He's mad all the time. What's wrong with him? The church owes our men better. Now, that's the next one I want to talk about, the next lie. This one's huge. We have a lot of misunderstandings about abuse and trauma. For too many years, the church has done a horrible job of understanding trauma and how it affects people's brains and their bodies. And in many churches, we have told survivors of abuse and trauma, you're just too emotional. You're just holding on to bitterness. It's time to get over it. It's time to move on. It's time to forgive. And we have silenced the wounded in order to maintain our peace and quiet. And what we now know, without a doubt, this has been proven. Trauma causes real mental and emotional damage to the brain, to the nervous system. And it gets stored in your body sometimes for years on end. But then when it does show up in your life in the form of panic attacks, PTSD, drug or alcohol addiction, anxiety, depression, hear me, it is not your fault. The victim is not at fault. And when we put all the blame back onto the victims, their symptoms don't go away, guys. It just gets worse. Trauma and abuse survivors need safe spaces so that they can feel those feelings and they can process those experiences so that they can heal in cooperation with the Spirit of God and the love of His church. And so that's why we at Community Christian just a few years ago, we decided we will do something in this space. And listen, we are by no means perfect. But I thank God every day that we're becoming a church that understands these things, and we are just trying to get this right. We are trying to do better. Finally, one more mistake that I think the church is making. We oftentimes place obedience over emotion. And I don't mean to offend anybody. I really don't, but I just need to say this. I think there are some phrases that we as Christians would be wise to eliminate from our vocabulary. I think it's time to be done with some phrases. Just choose joy. Have more faith. Faith over fear. And listen, I get it. They come from a good place. I don't deny that. And I'll say there is some truth in those ideas. But when we use phrases like these, thoughts like these, to dismiss people's emotions, people who just need to be heard instead of instructed. See, emotions aren't an obstacle to your obedience, but we treat them like they are many, many times. For example, when we feel grief, we don't explore it, we bypass it. We feel anger, we don't examine it, we label it as rebellion. We feel doubt, and we don't hold that in honest conversation. We judge it, and we call it sin. But with the help of Jesus through His Spirit, your emotions, they can be discipled. They can be respected and eventually be instructive to you. I tell clients this all the time. Your emotions are the same things as the warning lights on the dashboard of your car. Anybody who has a brain, who's smart, they don't see a light on the dashboard and then go behind the dashboard and try to unplug it. or to black it. I've heard some people, I just put a piece of black tape over it. That ain't smart. It's just not wise. What do smart people do? They pop the hood, they take it to a mechanic, they go down deep, they figure out what is the problem because the light tells me something's going on down there underneath that hood. It's time to get curious. And so we fix the problem that turned the light on, and then guess what? The light goes off. So when an emotion comes, it is your cue. Not to ignore it, not to try and stamp it out. It's your cue to get curious, to start asking questions, to wonder. It's time to feel that emotion. It's time to learn something from it. That's what it means to disciple your emotions, just like Jesus did. That's being obedient with your emotions, through your emotions, not in defiance of them and not in opposition to them. So that was a lot. So before we go on, we're going to practice some things. We're going to take a moment, and I just want us to sit with God and sit with our emotions, and we are going to practice what this might look like. I've invited Ed to come lead us. So at the time I have left, I thought it would be important to wrap things up by exploring some thoughts for all of us about how we can really begin to do this, not just as individuals, which is what we sort of experienced in that little moment. How do we start doing this as a church? How do we incorporate all of our emotional lives into our collective discipleship to Jesus? Well, I think one thing we've got to learn how to do, we got to start by learning how to name what we feel. We got to be honest about it, and we got to get some words. I think most of us, and this is not a crack on anybody because I think we're just all in the same state. Most of us walk around with the emotional vocabulary of a 5-year-old. I mean, we don't get much past I'm mad or I'm sad or I'm glad. All those good rhyming words, right? And it is true. I mean, trust me, I sit with people all day long, and I'd often ask them how they feel. In fact, if you don't know this, that's like the joke that all counselors know. We know y'all tell this joke about us all the time. All counselors ever ask is, how does that make you feel? I know that. And there's truth in it. But the truth is that's what we deal in. We deal in emotions. But whenever I ask people how they feel, I usually get back words like, I'm good, or I'm tired, or I'm sad, just kind of blah. My personal favorite is, I don't know. And listen, if you don't know, that's a great answer, okay? That's a totally fine answer. If you don't know, that's great. At least it's honest. But my point is we need to do better. We must do better for our sake, but also for the sake of each other. We must do better for our brothers and sisters. Can you imagine if whenever we gathered in this space, we walked through that parking lot into this room, we gathered as the church, we could look at each other in each other's eyes, and we could really ask, not just the how you doing, but the sincere question, how are you really? And what if we began to hear words back like this? I'm really disappointed this week. Or I'm just outraged at what I've experienced or seen. I'm feeling ashamed today. I spent most of this week feeling forgotten. I feel weak, insecure. Or I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling thankful. I'm confident. I'm peaceful. There's a resource that I expose clients to all the time. It's called the Feelings Wheel. Maybe you've heard of this. It's a great tool. Some of you need to spend a lot of time with a feelings wheel, okay? Because this will give you more words, more awareness of your emotional experiences. And you can get this on your phone. You just go to that website. It'll pull that image up on your phone. And what it will do is it will take you away from mad, glad, and sad and help you express what it is that you're really feeling down on the inside. Because when we learn how to speak to one another in this way, we begin to open up this part of our lives together. This is where we start to allow our emotions to draw us together in love, in support for one another. And eventually they can lead us right into the presence and in the guidance of God. So we need to learn how to name what we feel. That leads me to the second way we need to be emotionally healthy disciples. We have to learn how to bring our feelings to God like we just did together. And we've talked about this many times, but most of our prayer life, if you think about this, most of your prayers consist of reciting your list of wants and needs to God. Nothing wrong with that. You should do that. But if that's all you got, if that's all you ever bring to God, you have to ask yourself, what does that say about my relationship to God? So here's my challenge if you need some help. My challenge is spend the next 30 days, 1 month, in the book of Psalms. Now, some of you may not know what this is. If you're not familiar with them, the Psalms are just these ancient poems, these ancient songs that the Jewish people have been reciting for generations. Most of them were written by King David. There's 150 of them in your Bible. And if you read one psalm a day, now, here's my advice. When you read, and this is going to be hard for some of you, don't learn anything. That's not why you're there. You're not trying to learn anything. You're just there to sit with them. You're there to listen for the emotions that are being poured out onto the page, because that's what these are. They are just emotional expressions to God. You can pray these in your times with God. You can use these as prayers. I pray at least a psalm every single day. And I've learned over time that it is not about the specific words. It's not about the specific thoughts that are being conveyed. If I'm in the right space, about halfway through the psalm, or at least by then, I find myself starting to feel these emotions that are coming out of me and identifying with some of those thoughts or some of those feelings in the Psalms. And I can bring that feeling before God. And sometimes the feeling is joy for a victory. Sometimes it's gratitude for the blessings that God has given me. For example, one of my favorite Psalms, Psalm number 40. Probably the reason it's one of my favorites is because YouTube turned it into a song years ago, and that's my generation, and YouTube's awesome. But Psalm 40 is great. It goes like this. I waited patiently for the Lord to help me, and he turned to me. He heard my cry. He lifted me out of a pit of despair, out of the mud and the mire. He set my feet on solid ground, and he steadied me as I walked along. He's given me a new song to sing, a hymn of praise to our God. I love that because that's so true of my life. And when I sit with that emotion, it reminds me and it makes me grateful and joyful. But then there are other times that I pray the Psalms and the feeling on the page, it's not all joyful. Sometimes it's anger over injustice. Sometimes it's mourning. Sometimes it's lamenting over how incredibly sad and broken the world is. And it's just frustrating. Like Psalm 89. Oh Lord, how long will this go on? You going to hide yourself forever? How long will your anger burn like fire? Lord, where is your unfailing love? See, that's uncomfortable because most of us are thinking, sounds like he's like yelling at God. He's accusing God of doing something wrong. Is that what he's doing? Yes, that's what he's doing. That's exactly what the writer means. Is it okay? Yes, it's okay. Because that's how he feels. And he's bringing his emotions to God. And he doesn't just bring the happy clappy ones. He brings them all. Remember, this is what Jesus did. Jesus is our example, remember? And when we do this, we will draw near to God. And the promise is, he will draw near to you. He will meet you right there in that emotion. And you can feel it. And you can know that he is feeling it right along with you. And he gets it. He understands it. And he's with you and he's for you. So as we learn how to share our emotions with one another, or to name our emotions, to share our emotions with God, then we learn how to share our emotions with each other. And I've already talked about this a little bit. But I just want to give you another reason why this is so important. This is not just good for you individually. although it is, this is good for the body of Christ, the church. If we can become an emotionally open and healthy church, we are making it safe for the world to find their way to us. A world that can come in and find Jesus and the life that he offers. Come on, think about it. What good is it for us to hide behind this mask of I'm okay and you're okay and everybody's all got their crap together? What good is that? Where is there room for anyone to show up in this place and feel safe to say that they're feeling anything besides joy and peace? And I know what your pushback is. I hear it all the time. Oh, preacher, you just know I'm not a very emotional person. You're a liar. You're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself. To be human is to be an emotional person. It's what humans are. And this is coming from somebody who's been a pretty good liar for most of my life. When was the last time you had an emotion in front of another person? When was the last time you cried in front of anybody? If you can't remember, I would be curious about that. Because to be an emotionally healthy disciple of Jesus, and if we're going to create an emotionally healthy church, we must get over the need to manage our image. We must learn to share our emotions with one another, in front of one another, so that our world can see that it's safe in here. It's safe in this place. And if there's safety in here, guess what else is here? Healing. We can heal. Finally, we must become a community where we stop judging our emotions and start listening to what they are telling us. Some of us for way too long have shamed ourselves for our depression. You thought if I could just suck it up and paint on a smile, everything will be fine. Some of you have blamed yourself for lacking faith. And you're so scared and anxious. You hadn't had a full night's sleep in months. Some of you have been grieving for so long over a loss that it feels like bringing it up now would be embarrassing because you think you should have gotten over it by now. Some of you have had serious, lingering thoughts that the world would be better off without you in it. And I'm here to tell you, those emotions, they are not your enemies. They are messengers. I sit with people every week. They feel the exact same way you feel. And if it helps to have someone like me say this, I will say it to you right now. I don't judge you. I don't blame you. And neither does God. He is not mad at you. You have not disappointed him. He's not left you. He's right there with you, and he feels it right alongside of you. So I'm praying for you today. I'm praying that you'll tell somebody about what you're feeling, whatever that feeling might be. And I'm also praying that if someone tells you today how they're feeling, that your response would be very simple. Don't try to fix it. You don't have to do anything about it. You can just feel it right alongside of them, just as God is. You can say to them, hey, I get it. And it's okay. Me too. I'm with you. And if you feel that a person that you know might be in a place where they need some more help, each week we tell you that we have invitation cards out in the lobby that you can use to invite your friends. Well, today we've got some cards out in the lobby about our community Christian counseling services. And it's just a great, easy way for you to take that and share it with somebody you know who may need some extra support. You can share with them, hey, my church cares about this thing. I know you're struggling emotionally or mentally, but my church is here to help, and you can reach out to them, and they can contact me on that. The contact information's on that card, and we can help them. Today, if it's you that needs help, maybe you've started to come clear on that. There's a place on your card on your chair today that you can fill that out and let us know, hey, I'd like to talk to somebody. If you fill that out, I'll reach out to you this week, and we'll start a conversation, and we'll see where it leads. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to sit in a counselor's office. Maybe you just need to talk to somebody, or maybe you need some relationships that will help you. Whatever it is that you need, we'll figure it out together. But imagine, What if we became the kind of church for our community like this? What if we became the kind of church where nobody ever hid behind a fake smile? What if we became a church that knew how to grieve together, a church that knew how to rejoice and celebrate together, a church that walked beside one another while we were angry, while we were sad, while we were anxious, and nobody ever got judged, nobody ever got shamed for what they felt? What if we just were able to feel together? That's the church I think we're becoming, and that's the church I'm praying we become. So we want to bring all of ourselves to Jesus. We want to allow his love to transform us all. So today we're going to do that as we always do. We're going to meet Jesus at the table. Ed's going to lead us in that.